Chapter 6. The Inward-Facing Path. Awareness shines in each of our minds as the experience of being aware, the feeling of being, or the knowledge I am. As such, the knowledge I am is awareness's awareness of itself. The knowledge I am shines briefly in our experience at the end of every thought, feeling, sensation, or perception, although it usually remains unnoticed due to its brevity, as when the screen is revealed between two frames of a movie. The knowledge I am is also present during all thinking, feeling, sensing, and perceiving, but seems to be veiled by them, just as the screen remains present during a movie, but seems to be obscured by it. The knowledge I am, or awareness's knowledge of itself, is thus prior to and beyond all the finite mind's relative knowledge and experience. As such, it is absolute knowledge. In religious terms, this absolute knowledge is known as God. Thus, our knowledge of ourself is God's knowledge of Himself. It is for this reason that in the mystical Christian tradition, the resting of the mind in the heart of awareness is known as the practice of the presence of God, or the surrender of the mind to God's infinite being. The Indian sage Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj referred to it as focusing on the I am, by which he meant resting in the experience of I am, that is, simply resting in and as our essential, unconditioned, self-aware being. The use of the word focusing in this context is a concession to the mind's normal activity of directing itself towards or focusing on objective experience. To such a mind, the teaching suggests reorientating attention towards the knowledge I am. However, this is not a directing of the mind, but rather a resting of the mind in its own essence, the simple, non-objective experience of being aware or awareness itself. For a mind that is accustomed to directing itself exclusively towards objective experience, the experience of being aware, the feeling of being, or the knowledge I am, is a trace or a hint in the mind as to the direction in which to look for the peace and happiness for which it longs. The knowledge I am is like a small image of a screen appearing on that screen. From the standpoint of the image of the screen is part of the image. From the standpoint of the screen, it is the screen. From the point of view of the mind, the knowledge I am is an experience within the mind. From the point of view of awareness, it is awareness itself. It is this recognition that Rumi referred to when he said, "I searched for God and found only myself. I searched for myself and found only God." Thus, the knowledge I am is the experience in which the finite mind and infinite awareness intersect. It is a beacon that shines with the presence of awareness in the midst of experience. It is a portal through which the mind passes on its journey back to its source. It is for this reason that the words "Know thyself" were carved above the entrance to the Temple of Apollo in Delphi. And it is for the same reason that Balayani said, "Whoever knows their self knows their Lord." The journey that the mind takes from the objective content of its experience to its ever-present, innermost, irreducible essence is known in the Eastern traditions as meditation, and in the West as prayer. It is sometimes referred to as the inward-facing path, or the path of discrimination. This is not meant to imply inwards into the body, but rather inwards, away from the objects of experience, towards the essential, irreducible essence of the mind. In Sanskrit, it is referred to as Atma-vichara, which is often translated as self-inquiry or self-investigation. However, this can be misleading because the words inquiry and investigation in Western culture suggest a process or activity of the mind. Self-abidance or self-resting would be a better translation. Having said that, the phrases self-inquiry and self-investigation are legitimate because this process is, in most cases, initiated by a question such as, what is it that knows or is aware of my experience? Where do my thoughts come from? What is the nature of the knowing with which all knowledge and experience are known? Am I aware, or who am I? As the mind ponders these questions, it becomes progressively refined, travelling back through layers of objective experience, gradually purifying itself of all objective limiting qualities. In this way, self-inquiry or self-investigation gradually loses its dynamism and gives way to self-abidance, self-resting, or self-remembering, in which the irreducible essence of the mind stands revealed. The word revelation comes from the Latin revelare, from re, meaning back to the original, again or anew, and velare, meaning to cover or veil. Thus, a revelation is not a new experience, but rather the laying bare or uncovering of an essential truth that was previously obscured or distorted. As such, meditation or prayer is the unveiling of the mind and the subsequent exposure of its essential, irreducible essence. In other words, although meditation may seem at first to be an activity that the mind undertakes in order to achieve some new state or experience, it is later understood to be the very nature or essence of the mind itself. Meditation is what we are, not what we do. Most forms of meditation involve directing the mind towards some kind of object, such as a mantra, a flame, a deity, a guru, the breath, or the pause between breaths. In the case of conventional prayer, our love is directed away from ourself towards God, who is conceived to exist at an infinite distance from ourself. All these forms of meditation or prayer require directing the mind towards more or less subtle objects, and, as such, they all maintain the subject-object relationship. Whilst these are entirely legitimate, and in many cases necessary preludes to the ultimate meditation or prayer, they must at some point be abandoned. All paths have their strengths and potential pitfalls. For those on a path of devotion, to relinquish the object of devotion is the ultimate surrender. For those on a path of knowledge, to relax the focusing of attention or the controlling of the mind is the final test. Subject and object are like two sides of the same coin. They cannot arise or exist independently of one another. In order for the mind, the separate subject of experience, to disappear, or, more accurately, to lose its apparent limitations, the separate object of experience must also dissolve. In order for love to be experienced, both the lover and the beloved must vanish. Being aware of being aware, abiding in and as the self, resting in the I am, practicing the presence of God, is the only form of meditation or prayer in which the ego, the apparently separate subject of experience, is not maintained. It is, as such, the highest form of meditation or prayer. It is the meditation or prayer for which all other meditations and prayers are preparations. Our essential nature of inherently peaceful, unconditionally fulfilled awareness, which shines in each of our minds as the simple experience of being aware, or the knowledge I am, is equally present and available to all people, under all circumstances, in all situations, and at all times. It is not awareness that is obscured or missing. It is we who have turned away from it. That is, it is the mind that has turned away from its source and essence. However, I do not mean to suggest that mind is one thing and awareness another. The mind is in the same relationship to awareness as the character in a dream, from whose point of view the dreamed world is known, is to the dreamer's mind. All there is to the character in the dream is the dreamer's mind, but the dreamed character does not know this. As long as the dreamed character is focused exclusively on the objective content of her experience, she will never recognize the nature of her own mind, or, therefore, the reality of her world, and will never find the peace and happiness for which she longs. In order to know her own nature, she must turn her attention away from the objects of experience towards that with which they are known. She must know the nature of the knowing with which all knowledge and experience are known. She must become aware of the experience of being aware, which is the essence of her own mind. At night, the sun doesn't disappear. It continues to shine with the same brightness. It is the earth that has turned away from the sun and, as a result, has fallen into partial darkness. As soon as the earth turns round, so to speak, that part of it that was in darkness lights up. The fall in the Christian tradition is simply the turning away of the mind from its essence. It is the turning away of the soul from God's infinite being. The presence of awareness always shines with the same brightness, behind and in the midst of all experience. All experience is saturated with its presence. All that is necessary is to turn around. Lala, a 14th century mystic and poet from the Kashmir Shaivite tradition, referred to this turning around when she said, "I travelled a long way seeking God, but when I finally gave up and turned back, there he was, within me." We have searched for so long in objects, substances, activities, states of mind and relationships for peace and fulfillment. Although the acquisition or experience of any of these brings our search temporarily to an end and, as a result, gives us a brief taste of the peace and fulfillment for which we long, they do not last. It is only when we give up and turn back, only when we cease seeking peace and fulfillment in objective experience and turn the mind in the directionless direction, allowing it to sink deeper and deeper into the heart of awareness from which it has arisen, that we begin to taste the lasting peace and fulfillment for which we have longed all our life. From the perspective of the mind, this non-practice of abiding or resting in the experience of being aware, or awareness itself, seems to be a blank or dull state. However, in time, awareness's innate qualities of imperturbable peace and causeless joy emerge, in most cases gradually. This giving up and turning back, the turning around of the mind, was referred to in the early Orthodox Church as hesychasm, the silence of the heart. It is the non-activity in which the path of knowledge and the path of love or devotion meet. It is the experience in which self-investigation and self-surrender are understood to be one and the same. Awareness is recognition of itself, being aware of being aware, is not some kind of new knowledge. It is simply the clear seeing of what was always and already the case, but seemingly obscured by the activity of thinking and perceiving. Nor is awareness's recognition of its own essential nature an extraordinary experience, to which some minds have privileged access. Being aware shines equally brightly in all experience. Even a deep depression is illuminated by the light of awareness. Being aware is not buried, veiled, or hard to find. It is the very light of knowing with which all experience is known. Ramana Maharshi and the Buddha did not have special access to the nature of their own minds, nor any special qualifications. The Buddha just sat down under a tree and said to himself, "I am going to stay here until I recognize the nature of my own mind." The essential nature of his mind was exactly the same as the essential nature of each of our minds. When Ramana Maharshi was suddenly overcome by the fear of death, he lay down on the ground and simply asked himself, "What is the essential nature of myself? What cannot be removed from myself? What happens to awareness when the body dies?" In other words, he spontaneously engaged in the process of self-investigation. As a compassionate concession to people's difficulties and objections, all the great spiritual and religious traditions have enumerated various disciplines and practices to refine and prepare the mind for its eventual subsidence in its source or essence. Ramana Maharshi bypassed all these progressive means and went directly from his current experience to the essential nature of his mind, thus resurrecting the direct path for our age. This is the age of the direct path.